10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Well, hey there, little boggies.
Hello.
It's Daryl and Aaron here with episode 18 of Your Brain On. God. We are so excited that you are with us for episode 18, where we'll be talking about the constant temptation to shift blame onto other things and other people instead of taking responsibility in our lives. Because when we take responsibility in our lives, we put the power back in our hands so that we can have healthy lives and healthy relationships. So it's going to be a great episode. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. Enjoy the episode. All right. Well, what's going on, all of our boggies?
What's going on?
You know, I was thinking about you today.
Yeah? You were thinking about me, Aaron?
No, I was thinking about all the boggies out there listening to our podcast because we're in episode 18.
Episode 18.
Episode 18 is
go.
double 9.
Double 9. And you know how many lives a cat has?
Come on, dude.
That's like
episode 2 cats.
2 cats right here on a podcast.
Baby. Come on now, somebody. Welcome to our podcast. We're really excited to get into some healthy conversation today so that we might leave enlightened. Delivered.
I always hope to leave enlightened.
I hope to leave enlightened. Does that word actually mean like in light? Like
enlightened?
Like you're putting light inside yourself? Or like you're getting... Light is revealing things to you. Enlightened.
Enlighten me.
Or are you getting lightened, like weight? Or is it all together?
Maybe it's the both. Maybe it's the light within that makes you lighter without.
I think that's it. I think that's it. A lot of people are searching for enlightenment. You know? I think even now there's like a huge kick. I mean, there's been like a new age kick for a while of people like wanting to experience enlightenment, you know? I that's not even just a new age kick. That's been forever. I mean, Buddhist, Hindu cultures, they're all about enlightenment, I guess, right?
Yeah, Buddhists. Hindus. Yeah, there's a couple cults as well. Secret societies. Often about enlightenment, the Illuminati.
Conspiracy theorists. Yeah.
In the Freemasons.
We're all about enlightenment?
Yeah, I think so.
What were the Freemasons? I don't even know what they are.
They were Masons.
Who made mason jars?
They were Mason, like they did masonry work, like stone workers. They were volunteer stone workers for the city.
Oh.
That's why they were Freemasons.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But they became
now
a
there's
cult?
something very different.
Yeah, they became a cult?
I think they're considered, they're definitely a secret society, and I don't know if they'd be considered a cult. I guess they're a cult, but they're open to different religions. It's not like you have to believe in this religion, but you have to believe in this way. Like I think you're not allowed to tell other people that your way is the only way.
Right.
If you're part of the Freemasons. I don't know too much about it, but it has something to do with that.
Right. A lot of people get on like the Freemasons. I have no idea why. I feel like in the spiritual camp, it's like bad to be a Freemason, at least in the Christian church or whatever. There's like a lot of talk about like, your parents grew up in the Freemasons. You probably got a generational curse on you that's got to be broken. I'm like, what?
Well, I think there's a lot of there's a lot of weird spiritual stuff.
Is there like a lot of like satanic stuff or something like that?
I haven't looked into it specifically, but I wouldn't be surprised. Right. I mean, I don't think they would reject a Satanist.
Well, I do think it's just crazy that we all are like seeking something above ourselves, you know? Like there's a state to get to, like there's the spot of nirvana or there's the space of enlightenment. And, you know, there's the abundant life, maybe was what Jesus would say. I mean, obviously there's heaven, right? So there's some place that you go where everything kind of falls off you. You have a new body, like something's new, but it's inside of like human DNA almost to create, you know, like an ideal, I guess. Yeah. Like an ideal self or an ideal state of bliss, you know, that kind of stuff. And I think it's in our nature because there is a truth, right? Like, it's like there are all of these myths that hold truth. And then like Jesus is like, for us is the true myth of all of those,
the
you know?
Mythbuster.
He's the myth. Yeah, he's the myth buster. But that's what C.S. Lewis said about, like, because he was a mythologist.
Yeah,
or whatever. And he said
that's what he did. He studied myths and he found Christianity. And he's like, wait.
Yeah, and he says that Christianity is the most true of all the myths.
Yeah.
Right. But it's ever since like time began, how we would create stories about God and how, and how he interacted with humans, or how the multiple gods interacted with humans, like all in this attempt to seek out enlightenment or a higher way or a higher ideal and stuff. And it's like, it's almost in our DNA to seek that stuff out. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. To pursue something that's more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome. And it's only usually brokenness that keeps us from that stuff, or from like wanting to actually be actualized, would be like a self-help term.
Yeah. Actualization. Self-actualization.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. But that's in a way of what we're talking about here, not like an actualization, or, I want it to be more authentic than that, but like a conversation about how we can live the best life that we can live here on the earth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that we
absolutely.
can live and bring heaven to earth and love on people in the best way that we can, and be free and all that kind of stuff. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's what Jesus was about living the best that we can here on the earth, making a difference here on the earth.
Yeah.
In our own personal lives and then in the lives around us. And therefore our societies, our communities, our world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's awesome. So I'm excited to talk and dive into a little bit about what we got going on today, because today we're talking about responsibility and blame shifting, which is something, blame shifting for sure, something that we do since we're kids.
Super easily. Yeah, it's like embedded in us. It's so natural to blame.
Yeah, you don't have to talk to a kid.
So quick.
You don't have to talk to a kid long or discipline a kid for the first time before they say, like, I didn't do it, or he did it, or she did it, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's also in our DNA, it seems like.
Yeah.
As much as we want to be enlightened, also this need for blame shifting and for a lack of responsibility. And so that's what we want to kind of talk about today with you guys, is that tendency that we have to not take responsibility in our own lives. Right? Not take responsibility in our relationships, in our work lives, in our own personal journeys, on our own self-discovery and self-awareness, to deal with some of the fears inside of us, the insecurities, all of those things, and actually taking a responsibility for what's actually inside of us and our situations outside of us, and then not putting the blame on. Literally, you could just put the blame on everything on anything else for any reason that is the reason why you are where you are, or why you are who you are,
right,
is because of somebody else or something that happened to you. And so we want to talk about, how do we actually work through that, and how do we kind of shift our paradigm away from blame shifting and into a sense of responsibility. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah. I think that something that I thought about a couple years ago, just how much maturity and the ability to take responsibility are intertwined. Whenever I see somebody who's really mature, they tend to take responsibility, right? They don't tend to blame, but they accept responsibility for things. Yeah. On the other hand, whenever I see people who seem really immature, or just even kids, tend to push responsibility off or blame it on someone or something else. And I was thinking about how when we're like, why do we start blaming in the first place? And I think that when we're really young, we learn that if we blame, we don't get in trouble. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We learn if we can learn how to blame good, like blame well,
right,
then we avoid punishment. Right. We avoid suffering. And so we start like, I didn't eat the cookies. No, it was so-and-so.
Right.
Or no, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
It was somebody else.
My sister ate the cookies, or she gave them to me, or any way that you can blame, or she started the fight.
Right. We learned this
fight,
this tool of blaming, of like how it can protect us, and it could even get somebody else in trouble.
Right.
So we could put the blame on someone else, and they could take the punishment instead of us. Something that my older siblings did. This is something that happened before I was born, I think, but I remember hearing the stories. Is my sister, when she was really young, wrote on the wall my brother's name, her older brother's name, my older brother as well, but wrote his name on the wall, but spelt it wrong.
Kids are the worst.
Put the Y backwards. His name is Wayne. I think she wrote the Y backwards. And so she wrote it on the wall, Wayne, with a backward Y, and then went and told on my parents, saying that he wrote on the bathroom wall. And they went in and looked and saw that the Y was backward, and they were like, they're like, Nicole, did you write this? And she was like, Wayne did it. You know? But totally got caught and found out. Right? But there's this thing we learned that we can blame somebody else and then they can take the responsibility for it. Right. And it's like whenever we do that, we are giving up. Whenever we're blaming our own responsibility, I guess, whenever we have something that we're responsible for, we blame somebody else, and then they suddenly are the ones that are responsible for it.
Right.
And when they're the ones responsible for it, they're the ones responsible to change it. Right. They're the ones responsible for the repercussions as well.
Yeah.
And there's this dynamic and a relationship between responsibility and power, where the person who's holding the responsibility is the one who had the power to do something or has the power to do something about it. Right. So once we blame someone, now they have the power in their hands. Right. We don't have the power in our hands. Right. Mm-hmm. I wasn't even able to do that. That was this person. They did it. Right. They have the ability to do it. Right. And so we brush it off, and we also relinquish our own ability to do anything. Right.
Or I think the feeling of being punished or being wrong, or even as a kid, like denying in a game that he's out, those things make us feel powerless. Right.
Yeah.
Or we made a mistake, and so we want to grasp for power again. Right. We want to grasp for like, that I'm good at this or something like that. Like I think about this kid. Oh my gosh. There's some children that they just need to get it handed to them. Okay. But there's this kid, we went up to camp a couple years ago, and this camp had this super fun game. It was basically dodgeball archery. Okay. Many people died. I'm kidding. God rest. God bless their souls. What is it? God rest. Never mind.
Rest their souls.
God rest ye merry gentlemen. Okay. No, but we would play, and they had like pads. They almost look like big marshmallows on the end of what are they called? The arrows? Why can't I think right now? I was going to say the archery sticks.
The archery sticks. Right at the end of the archery sticks. Archery sticks with big marshmallows on them.
And we were playing with archery sticks. No, okay. And so it was dodgeball with bows and arrows with these big marshmallow, these pads or it. And it was the most fun thing ever. But this kid, no matter how much you would hit him, okay, he would just keep denying that you hit him over and over and over again. And I almost want to say his name on the podcast just so he knows. But I won't do it. But he had probably gotten hit, 2 or 3 times. By that point, he kept denying that he was out. And so us leaders, I think it was leaders against students, we were like, oh, we are going to get you. I almost said his name again. We are going to get you out. I pull the arrow back and I just fire it at him, and it hits him. It hits him right where the sun don't shine. Okay.
Right on the spot.
Right on the spot. It hits him right there. And I rejoiced in that moment. This is the greatest joy of a youth pastor, is to hurt children.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. When you're a youth pastor, you get a headshot or you get a nut shot. It's just, it's just the best. But I could imagine as a kid, right? You get hit, you don't want to be out. So there's something that you want that now you don't get to play because now you're out. But then 2, that can make you feel ashamed about how good you are at something, right? You strike out, or something like that, where you get out. And so that makes you feel in a way like powerless, or I messed up. And so grabbing a hold of power, deny that even happened, right? I'm still in the game. I still get to do what I want to do. And I can still kind of pretend that I'm good at what I'm doing. Right?
It's like trying to protect ourselves.
Exactly. Or grab a hold of power. The real problem is you're probably not fooling anybody else when you're really, doing, I think it's called gaslighting in certain relationships, or whatever, when you're really just like pushing to say that you didn't do anything. People are really starting to disrespect you. You know what I mean? Or not disrespect you, but not respect you. About the decisions you're making, or not taking responsibility, and you're actually losing power because you're not taking responsibility over yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so we have the tendency to push that on, to put blame on other people to gain back power, right? But really, we're losing it altogether.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
We are becoming more and more powerless by not actually taking what is in our ability, like the what we are responsible to take.
Right.
Because when we practice taking that responsibility, then, because if he did get hit and he acknowledged that he got hit, then he can think about, okay, how can I not get hit next time?
Exactly. Yeah.
But if he's constantly thinking, no, I wasn't hit, no, I wasn't hit, no, I wasn't hit, no, I wasn't hit.
Right.
But he really was hit all
Right.
those times, then he's not going to get any better at it.
Right.
He's never going to learn from it if he keeps trying to act like nothing happened.
It doesn't allow him to grow, and it makes everybody hate him.
Specifically the youth pastor.
Specifically me.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Is that we push off the responsibility in an attempt to protect ourselves.
Right.
Right. I think that there could be all kinds of reasons that we blame. Right. All kinds of reasons that we don't take responsibility for something or put the blame on someone else. But I think often it is the sense of, I did something that I'm not proud of.
Right.
Right. Something that I knew I shouldn't have done, or
Right.
I did something that I didn't mean to do. And when we blame, it's almost like we're trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to, we want to feel good. I mean, everybody wants to feel good about themselves, right? We always
Right.
want to feel like we're doing well. We always want to feel like we made the right choice and did the right thing.
Right.
And so we blame and allow that thing that we were doing to kind of get swept under the rug. Maybe we're not even aware that that's what we're doing.
Right.
But it could be so easily to just say it was someone else's fault without acknowledging what it is that we have, the responsibility that we had in it.
Right. Right.
And it's, I think it's something that plagues in work. It happens in work. It happens in just family dynamics with like even like siblings or parent-child relationships or loved ones, right? Your significant others. Whenever we keep blaming the other person or blaming somebody else, then we actually neglect our ability to grow. We neglect and we postpone and we push off our ability to grow and to become more self-aware and to just become a healthier and more wholesome human being.
Right.
Because once we start acknowledging those things, then we could do something about it.
Right.
But as long as we're not acknowledging it and it's always somebody else's fault, we cannot do anything about that.
Right.
Because where the responsibility lies, so lies the power.
Yeah. Where the responsibility is, there's the power.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're putting the responsibility on somebody else, you're giving away the power.
Giving the power to them to make it any different.
Right. And so now you're waiting for them to change in order for your situation to change, you know what I mean? Or your internal state to change. And now you become a powerless person. I remember a little while ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, I read a book called Keep Your Love On by Danny Silk.
Yeah.
It's about relationships and he goes about it's about intimate relationships. But he goes about it in an interesting way because he talks about being a powerful person.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And how a powerful person chooses the person that they're with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not just in marriage, but they choose them every day. They choose, the thoughts that they have and the things that they allow themselves to entertain. And they choose to keep their love on every single day. Right.
Yeah.
And it's easy for us, especially in relationships, to place blame on other people for our lives, to get better, not take responsibility, become powerless people, and then create reasons for why our relationships fall apart. And that's what he was saying throughout the book is a lot of these relationships are falling apart because there's not two people each taking responsibility for keeping their love on in a relationship. And obviously it's harder than it sounds. Keep your love on. Yay. You know what I mean? And that's what he was saying is that it's very difficult, you know what I mean? But it is a choice and it is a responsibility. It's something within our power to do. It's not the other person's job to make you whole, right? It's not the other person's job to make sure that you're always, feeling okay. You have a responsibility in the relationship to keep on loving as Jesus would love that person. Yeah. And I remember it being super impactful to me because a lot of the time I would just let my feelings take control of me in relationships, right? Or I wouldn't even get into a relationship because I would immediately discount it if my feelings weren't aligning with, the certain relationship. And that was really impactful for me because it made me realize, wait a second, I get to choose who I want to be with. You know, like, and I get to choose how I love that person and how I think about that person. And even if I do have problems with that person, I get to choose what I do with those thoughts about that person or those problems. I get to choose to be a responsible person that has conversations with them. And I remember it started to shift kind of this mentality I had, because I had thought in my mind for so long that no one's good enough. You know,
right.
I had really thought that I'm just like, dude, I'm just awesome. And to be honest, there's just no one that is as solid as me, which is very prideful. I get it, right? But it was really me placing the blame on other people and not taking responsibility for my own fears in relationships, right? My own decisions in relationship, my own thoughts. It was me not taking responsibility. And that book opened up my eyes to realize the power that I had inside me.
Yeah, because the more we continue to blame the other person,
right,
the more we're going to continue to have relationships like that.
Exactly.
If it's always, no, this relationship didn't work out because they are like this.
Right.
This person didn't work out because they did da-da-da. This person didn't work out because they are da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And then the whole time we're never looking at ourselves to see what's actually happening inside of us that's causing this pattern.
And you know what shifted it for me was I remember the moment I was outside. I was at my parents' house. I was sitting by like our fire pit or whatever. It was daytime. I wasn't on. Why am I describing these details? But I was sitting out there and I was praying to the Lord. And I was asking him, well, or I was just not really praying. I was mulling it over, and I was like, well, if this was just different, and I remember, going into one of my first serious relationships, if this was just different, and I don't know about this, and this kind of stuff. And I remember I had this heart shift, and it was a part of reading this book, but also it was like the revelation of God, a heart shift. And I changed my prayer. I stopped thinking about all the things that were, could be better in the relationship or with this person. And I thought to myself, you know what, God, don't change her. I need you to change me. Yeah. And it was like this, you know what I mean? This super paradigm shift. I ended up getting in the relationship. It ended up not working out, but it was a solid relationship. And she was awesome, but it was this paradigm shift where it was like, oh wait, she's not the problem. You know what I mean? She's not the problem for my relationship issues. You know what I mean?
Right.
I have to take responsibility for those, but I want to go after this and I want to make a decision about this. So I'm going to take power back and go into it. Right.
Yeah.
And that was crucial in being even where I'm at now with relationships. When you actually start to take responsibility, you take back that power,
Yeah. You take back the power to choose to do something, right? To make a decision. Mm-hmm. There's a book, called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And Dr. Stephen Covey talks about one of the habits. He talks about the circle of influence. And within your circle of influence is everything that you have an influence over, right? Everything that you can somehow affect. Within your circle of influence is all the all the things that you can make a decision to do something about, and you'll have some kind of impact, whether it's a little bit or if it's a lot, right? Mm-hmm. And then he has your circle of concern, which is wider than your circle of influence, right? So you have your circle of concern that's much bigger than your circle of influence. That's usually how it works.
Right.
And the more we focus on our circle of concern, the smaller our circle of influence becomes.
Jeez.
Because we're not focusing on what we can actually do. We're focusing on all the things that we're worried about.
Jeez.
We're focusing on all the things that are outside of our power, outside of our influence. And
I gotta read that book.
It's a good book.
I have it on my bookshelf, just haven't picked it up yet.
Oh, pick it up. Yeah. That's not one just to collect dust. That's a good book.
Yeah.
And the more we focus on the things that are outside of our influence, the less influence we actually have, because we're not utilizing our own power.
Right.
But the more we focus on our circle of influence, the bigger it becomes. The more that we focus on what we can actually do, the more impact we will have in our lives, right? And he gives this example of somebody who's in a work environment where everybody's just blaming the boss for the current situation, blaming the boss for the working environment, blaming the boss for the kind of experiences they have there, the way the progress is happening. They're blaming the boss, and then one person decides to focus on their circle of influence, and they think about, okay, what can I actually do in this? What are the ways that I can help? What are the ways that I can contribute? What are the ways that I can make this better? And the more that person did that, the more their influence grew in the environment, the more that they were able to start impacting things, and the more power that they were able to have in the environment, not like power and dominance, but just the ability to have an impact.
Influence.
Yeah, influence. And so the more that we focus on the things that we can actually do and stop blaming somebody else for what they have done or what they're doing, but think about what we're doing, the more power we can start taking back in our own lives, right? It's like the way that we can empower ourselves.
Right.
Taking responsibility is a way to empower ourselves. So that way we're not living disempowered. Every time we blame somebody, we're disempowering ourselves.
Right.
Every time we blame somebody, we're pushing power off of ourselves. We're giving power away. And like you said, we're waiting for them to do something in order for our life to be different.
Right.
And we're making them responsible for our own life, right? We're making them responsible for our state of being.
Right.
When in the reality of things, we are the only ones who could be responsible for ourselves.
Right.
Right. We are responsible for how we respond to life. But if we're constantly blaming somebody else, we're giving that power to someone else.
Yeah.
And we're saying you can change. You have to change this.
You have to change this. Yeah. And I think that happens on a work level a lot, you know, and it kind of brings me back to the story that we were talking about last episode at Starbucks, you know, when we were talking, or maybe that was 2 episodes about being grateful, you know, when I was at Starbucks, and then everyone's complaining about something or about a job that they don't have to work at, you know,
right?
And about doing something that they can actually change, you know what I mean? And so that happens on a work level. I think that happens on a real personal level too, with issues, you know what I mean? With experiencing just pain or trauma in life.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
I have the most compassion for people that have gone, you know, I don't have the most, I have the most compassion out of anybody in the world, but
I've measured.
I've checked. I have measurable goals, and no, I have a lot of compassion for people who have gone through trauma. I've been through some of my own trauma. Daryl, you've been through, you know, through trauma, and there is an aspect to your home life, kind of your nurture, you know, nature versus nurture has affected you, has affected us in life. And there are certain patterns that I am trying to break out of that were maybe handed down to me. Some of us got a bad, what is it called? The bad thing of cards?
Bad hand.
They got dealt a bad hand. I swear my words are everywhere today. Okay. We got dealt a bad hand, you know?
Yeah.
But at some point, there has to be a separation between the hand that you were dealt and the responsibility for actually living the way that you want to live. Yeah. Right? Because when we just are constantly going back to, this is what my dad did, this is what my mom did, this is what my family, you know, grew out of, this is what this person did to me. And as painful as those things, and I'm not saying you shouldn't work through those things, right? And understand them and acknowledge them as something that did happen to you. But if we stay right there, we are giving our past the power over us, right? We're giving other people and their words and their pain and their brokenness, we're allowing that to define our life in the present and ultimately in the future. Yeah. Right? And so at some point, there has to be a delineation, you know what I mean? Or a cutting off, a breaking off from placing the blame on, well, that was just the family I grew up in, you know? And it's like, well, are you with them still? You know, like you don't have to live from that family. What does your family, you know what I mean? They have said those things about you, but what do they have to do with the decisions that you can make today? And I'm not saying that's easy at all, by any means. There are still things that are very hard, you know what I mean, for me to break out of because I felt like I grew up in these certain things. Right. But my family situation, my parents getting divorced, or, you know, what my dad did, what my mom did, you know what I mean, where my family's at now, what does that have to do with where I'm at today? You know? Like I am right here, and a part of that, it has made me who I am, but the decisions I can make today, I can make powerful decisions today, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, we don't have to allow the past to determine our present or our future. And as soon as we realize that, we start to take the power back. Right. Because whenever something bad happens to us, that it's legit that happened. You know? It did. It's not like it didn't happen. We don't need to act like it didn't happen. But now that has happened, what can I do about it? Right. What can I do from this point? Right. Right. My family didn't do conflict growing up. When I was growing up, my family never did conflict well. Never saw anybody resolve an argument. Right. Right. So I don't know how to resolve arguments.
Now I could say that, I can acknowledge that,
Right.
but then from that point,
What are you going to do?
what can I do?
Right.
Can I do anything? Okay, well, I can learn how to resolve. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Right. That's me. That's my story. It's like I never saw my parents resolve an argument. I always saw them argue. I never saw them make peace.
Right.
Saw a lot of tension in relationships. Never saw them get resolved. Right. So I always avoided conflict, always avoided arguments. But now that I realize, hey, that's something I came from, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
There's another way of being. Now it's my responsibility to do something about it. As soon as I become aware of it, I am responsible for it.
Right.
I'm aware that that's unhealthy.
That was good, Daryl. I can't gloss over that. As soon as you become aware of something, yeah.
You're responsible for it, right? As soon as I'm aware of it, I'm responsible for it. And so once I realize I have these unhealthy patterns from my upbringing or just from experiences that I've had, once that becomes my realization, once that comes to my attention, I'm responsible to do something with it.
Right. Well, let's delineate real quick right there.
Yeah.
There are some things that are not your fault.
Right. Yeah.
Like what happened to you, what your parents did to you, or whatever, is not your fault. But you can't change what they did, right? And it's not your fault that what happened to you happened, right? But it now is your responsibility to decide how you respond to what has happened to you in life.
Yeah, we don't have to keep giving them the responsibility of who we are today. We can start taking that responsibility back with who we are.
Right.
And in doing so, we take back the power of who we are.
Right.
We take back the power to be somebody different than who we've been.
Right.
Doesn't mean that it was okay, or doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It doesn't mean that it was our fault. But as soon as we can start taking the responsibility of now, right, the power that I do have in this moment,
right,
the more I can continue to walk forward. Because then I can start acknowledging the times I've blamed someone else, but it really was my fault.
Right.
Or maybe it wasn't completely my fault, but I had something to do with it.
Right.
Maybe I didn't need to respond the way I responded.
Right.
Maybe I didn't need to say that thing I said or do that thing I did. I can take responsibility in that so that I don't do it again next time.
Right. Yeah.
But as long as I keep blaming the argument on somebody else, I'm never going to acknowledge my own contribution to the unhealth.
And it does take a good amount of reflection, and maybe we can talk about for a little bit the reason why it's so hard for us to accept that responsibility.
Yeah,
because with that with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah. Thank you, Uncle Ben. Yeah. There is an aspect that there is a weight to the responsibility that you are taking on. Like I love in the Bible in Exodus, I believe, Exodus or Leviticus, but they're basically, I think it's Exodus. They're making the priestly garments, and it's for Aaron and his tribe, and the Levites. And they're making all the priestly garments, and it's talking about what they're going to be made of and all this different kind of stuff. And something that really stood out to me was that on each shoulder, there was 2 stones, each with the 12 tribes of Israel on them, right? Or I don't know if they was 6 and 6 or they both had all 12. I can't remember at this moment. But there were stones
on their shoulders that had the tribes of Israel on them. The tribes of Israel that they were the priests over. Right? Yeah.
And so with the responsibility of wearing the priestly garment, there was a weight that was put on their shoulders.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So true.
Which totally stood out to me. I was like, wow, that's crazy, because with responsibility comes a weight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There comes a charge with that responsibility. And so I think sometimes we stray away from that. I think a lot of times we want to be certain places in life, but we're not willing to accept the weight of the responsibility in order to get where we want to be,
right,
or to who we want to be.
Because if I take responsibility, that means I have to let this thing go, or it means I have to change this, right?
Yeah.
I
have to take on something.
And I have to take on that weight.
Right. And so Aaron even, was Aaron in Egypt?
Yeah.
He was a slave in Egypt. So imagine that, even coming out of taking off of, a slave, because that's really what you are when you're not accepting responsibilities. You're a slave to that person that you're giving responsibility to, right? So it's Egypt's fault.
Egypt's fault.
It's basically Egypt's fault that we're slaves, and now it's Moses' fault. And the Israelites did this a lot. Now it's Moses' fault that we're in the desert.
Right.
You know what I mean? And now it's God's fault.
To come out here.
I know. And now it's God's fault, right? And we're placing the blame on everybody, right?
Yep.
So he had to take off the slave garments, right? And then he got a new responsibility, new garments of being a priest for the people of Israel. But that responsibility came with a weight.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a lot of times why we stray away from actually taking ownership about that, because it's uncomfortable to be responsible for something, and it's difficult, but it is worthwhile.
Yeah. And I would always want it. I'd rather be under the weight of taking responsibility than under the weight of somebody else being responsible for me.
Right. Yeah.
Because then I have nothing. I can't do anything about it.
Yeah. You have zero control.
Yeah. And I think that we blame because we do want, like we mentioned earlier, protect ourselves. We're ashamed of something, or we're afraid to acknowledge the brokenness in ourselves, right? We're afraid to acknowledge the disappointment that we might find, if we do take responsibility.
Right.
We're afraid that if we take responsibility, that we're gonna feel lesser, right? We feel lesser than what we want to be,
right?
But it's from that point that we can truly heal, right?
Yeah.
We can't heal if we don't acknowledge the wound.
Right.
If we just keep letting the wound fester, and it's like we're not taking care of it.
Totally.
And we just keep lashing out or blaming somebody else for it. We never actually tend to the wound.
Right.
So it can heal.
Right.
Once we take responsibility, we can start doing that.
Right.
But it's a lot easier sometimes, or it feels easier in the moment, to just blame someone else. But at the end of the day, in the long run, we end up pushing people away. We end up hurting relationships. We end up disappointing ourselves because we're not living the life we actually want to live.
Right.
And we're putting the blame on somebody else, which means we're putting the responsibility on somebody else, which means we're putting the power in somebody else's hands.
Right.
Whether it's the situation, or if it's another person, or if it's God, or if it's Satan, whatever the situation is, when we blame someone else, we're giving them the power to make the difference.
Right.
And as long as they are responsible, it'll stay the same. We can't do anything about it.
Right.
Once we take the moment to say, I'm responsible for this, I'm going to do something about it, then we have that power back.
We have that power back.
Right? We have that ability to do something.
Right.
We saw Adam and Eve. We saw them right there in person.
Yeah.
Live TV. If you read about Adam and Eve in the garden, God creates humanity and he gives them responsibility, right, to take care of the garden, tend to the garden, be fruitful and multiply, right? He gives them these responsibilities. But don't eat from this tree. Then what happens? They do what they weren't supposed to do.
They run, they hide from God.
Yeah, they run, they hide, right? They're trying to ignore, try to get away. That didn't actually happen. They run from God, they hide. God confronts them about it, and they have this opportunity to take responsibility for what they did.
Right.
But what happens when God confronts Adam? Adam says, "It was the woman that you gave me.
That you gave me.
Right. It was the woman that you gave me."
Right.
So what happened? God gave him this responsibility, which comes power as well. And then Adam gives the power and the responsibility to Eve and back to God.
Right.
So now Adam is relinquished himself of the responsibility and the power in the situation.
Right.
And then
doesn't own up to it.
Right. He forfeits his ability to make a difference, to actually have any kind of influence in the situation.
And then God goes to Eve.
Yes, and
so
Eve
he gives her a chance too.
And then he goes to Eve, and Eve says, "It was the serpent.
Right.
The serpent deceived me, and then I ate it." And so God gives power and responsibility to Adam. Then Adam points the power and responsibility to Eve and to God, and then Eve points the responsibility and power to the serpent.
Right.
So now the power is in the hands of God and the hands of the serpent.
Right.
Adam and Eve are left powerless.
Right.
Because they have forfeited it in this situation.
Right.
And that happens all the time, where we are just constantly forfeiting the power that we have to do anything.
Right.
Because we're not willing to take responsibility and accept whatever punishment there may be, or accept whatever truth we may need to face, right? We may need to face. And we just forfeit our ability to make a difference and to impact the world. But God is still giving us the ability to do something today, right? And we have to make the choice to accept that responsibility, to grow, to be the person that he wants us to be the father,
Right.
the son, the friend, the worker, the boss that he's calling us to be, right? Well, we have to take that responsibility and stop blaming other people, because as long as we're doing that, we can't make any difference.
Right.
We don't make a difference.
Yeah. And that's a huge pattern for today. I mean, especially in the Christian camp, when someone's like struggling or there's things going on. Like I mean, I've only seen a little bit. I'm only 26. I've been a pastor for a little while. But certain marriages even that I see, and I don't have like a huge, obviously I'm not married, so I don't have a lot, but from what I've seen, there's a lot of blame on Satan for marriages being messed up. And then I'll have counseling sessions with these people and I'm like, he might have an influence, but you're messed up, you know what I mean? Like there's some responsibility, like prayer is great, but unless you stop talking to him and demeaning him like that, it's probably not going to change. Or unless he actually, realizes that you need comfort in these moments when you're grieving, or that you're struggling with this, those things aren't going to change. You know what I mean? Like the devil might have had an influence in it, but it's our responsibility how we respond to any of his attacks, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I've seen a lot in that aspect, as well as probably a bigger one is putting the blame on God. For things that we think he's responsible for. I mean, that's like one of the biggest questions ever in kind of the criticism against God existing, or Christianity being real, is just like the problem of evil, and like God is responsible for the sin of the world, and then there's arguments for that with, free choice of people to make those decisions and having a responsibility, to make the world good. He gave the power to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply, take care of the land. Like he put almost the earth in charge of us. In that way
us in charge of the earth.
Yeah. And so we have that responsibility there, but there's a huge, and it's unfortunate. It's really sad actually to see people blaming God for the fact that someone got sick in their family, or the fact that they're going through a hard time, or these things aren't going well in their lives. You know what I mean? And it's, and I get the pain there. Like there's some serious pain where, especially if you have had somebody taken from you or something like that, where it's like, God, where were you? And why did you do that? And all those feelings are okay. But again, if you remain there, you know what I mean? You're really putting the blame on someone who is the source of your healing. I would say for the first part, and you're not allowing yourself a chance to grow. You're not allowing yourself a chance to move on from that because you're still holding on to God, as I can't believe you did that. And so you can't actually move with God or move into a different decision or let go of those things, because the more that you hold on even to that person who did the wrong, say it's God, right? The more you're constantly reminded of that situation as well. So like you have to almost let go of that blame and responsibility for the things that have happened in your life too. And that's more of a forgiveness thing, so that you can let go and continue to live your life. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's huge too, in taking responsibility for your own life. But those are two big things, especially the Satan thing, especially in the Christian camp. Most people I would say would deny that it's like God's fault, like that, that bad things happen, or it's like free will. But then people that are outside the Christian camp, I think there's a lot of blame of God, I mean, in people that, and that's why people sometimes leave the church or stop believing in God, is like, how could I ever, trust this God who's done this to me and this to me and this to me and this to me. Right.
Yeah. I remember when I was younger, not so much anymore, but whenever my dad and my sister passed away and my brother, when I was a teenager, I remember coming and, when people would find out, that I was like, oh my gosh, wow, how are you doing okay? Not on drugs and alcohol, why are you not like addicted to something? And people being surprised because they've, seen people go through things who who turn to drugs, turn to alcohol, or turn to something. I'm fortunate enough to not have fallen into that whenever I was in a really like dark place. But I remember at one point having the revelation that whenever I had this analogy in my mind, whenever like a wall falls down in my life, whenever things like just crumble to pieces, the pieces are either going to be stepping stones or stumbling blocks. And that's up to me.
Wow.
Am I going to see all the pieces of my life that just crumbled? Am I going to use those to get me somewhere else? Or am I going to stumble around and trip on all of them?
Wow.
And that was something that I had to choose to do, right? Because I couldn't change the fact of what happened.
That's a revelation from God. I don't know how you did that young. How old were you?
I was probably 15 when, or 14 or 15.
Dude, that is wisdom beyond your ears.
Yeah, it was from God. Yeah, for sure. that was a mic drop.
Yeah, that got me.
Accidental mic
Flesh and
drop.
blood did not reveal this to you, Daryl.
No, for sure. No, and God gave me this revelation of this.
Wow.
The ability that I have to choose.
Right.
Right. I get to choose when everything falls down or everything goes crazy. I get to choose how I respond.
Right.
And that has guided me through a lot of things I've gone through in life. And that's been able to keep me on the positive side, meaning be able to still see the positives even when there are negatives, just because I know that the positives are still out there, even if I'm surrounded by negative things.
Right.
Tony Robbins gives a story kind of is exemplifying this with to these two twin brothers, and he meets one on a plane, talks to them, and then his guy's like super happy, excited about life, all these great things. He's successful in what he's doing. And then he's like, all right, see you later. Then he runs into the same guy on a plane, and he sees him, but he's super like sad, depressed, dark, and like weighed down, not happy about anything, just complaining.
Same guy or his twin?
It's his twin brother, but
No
in
way.
the story, he doesn't know that. That's what he's saying. But they both have the same experience, right? So one guy is like, yeah, the first guy's talking about how, when we were young, I went through a lot, it was really like a big struggle, and that really taught me just how to overcome and to do what I can do, right? And to take responsibility for my life. And then the other person was like, yeah, well, when I was young, I went through so much stuff, and it was so hard, and that really just weighed me down. And it's not like he wasn't taking any responsibility in the matter. Not that it was his fault, but not realizing the ability that he had to do something. Right. Not realizing the ability that he had to do something different. Where his brother took that stance. He took that perspective where he realized this stuff is something that I can learn from.
Yeah.
And that was him taking responsibility for his life, not allowing the circumstances to determine who he was going to be, but allowing the circumstances. It was a chance for himself to be revealed, like for who he can become. Right. And, in that it's just reveals the truth that no matter what happens, we can decide how we're going to respond. Yeah. Right. Regardless of what happens, we can decide how we're going to respond. And I've heard some people go through some terrible things I have never gone through, wouldn't want to go through, wouldn't wish on anybody, but come out better. Not because of it, but despite the thing that happened. Right. That thing they didn't allow to determine their life. And that's a big deal because whenever we allow things to determine who we're going to be, then we're going to be tossed to and fro. We're never going to be able to stand our own feet. We're going to be going all over the place because the power that we have to acknowledge it. Right? We have to be able to acknowledge what we have, the ability that we have to do something before we actually decide to do something. And sometimes life comes at us and it makes us feel like we can't do anything about it.
I was going to say that. What do you feel like? There's a lot of things that blind us from being able to see that we actually have power.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That make us feel powerless. Like I don't have a decision in this. I'm trying to think through some examples, but what are some of those things that make us feel like we don't have power, or like kind of like drain us of that? Like it's just, I guess it's a perspective thing, right?
I think it can be anything. I mean, you can get fired from your job,
Right. You didn't have control over that.
Right.
Or I guess you did, but
Well,
it depends on what. It depends on what.
You might
for
have
what
had
reason.
something to do. You might have had some responsibility. I don't know.
Yeah, probably
But maybe the company, it was in
a layoff.
yeah,
Let's
maybe
say
they were
layoff.
going to
during
lay off.
COVID. Even, you know, what I mean,
yeah,
like a lot
right.
of people got laid off.
Exactly during COVID. So
Right.
say during COVID, businesses had to close down. They had
Right.
to let go of employees, and someone's in that situation
Right.
where they didn't do anything wrong,
Right.
but they're in the situation where now they're suffering.
Right. I was talking to somebody after that. He was actually a real estate agent, and when COVID hit, he was like, "I just started working harder, bro." You know. And he was like super stoked. He was super energetic and just like, he's like, yeah, everyone, all of the real estate agents, they just stopped. He's like, I just took advantage of it.
Wow.
He's like, everyone stopped. He's like, I started just doing, I guess he started doing virtual stuff and just started going after. He's like, I've had more business than like I've ever had. Like I'm in it. Like I'm just grinding.
Yeah.
Like, and he was just like, you know what I mean? Like he was stoked, but because he was taking responsibility. And he was like, all right, COVID's not going to like lay me out. I'm just going to do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I'm going to take the cards I've been dealt and I'm going to run with it,
Yeah.
And so he was able to, but is it just perspective? Is it sometimes, I mean, a personality trait just to be more positive? You know what I mean? Or is it, like, cause there's one person who's a real estate agent that's just like, whatever, I guess I'm not going to do anything. And then he was, for some reason he's just like,
yeah,
I'm just going to do it. You know what I mean? He's ready to go. So what prepares us or allows us to see that responsibility that we have is what I'm trying to ask, I guess.
Yeah. I think that, part of it is probably just a general sense of confidence. Mm-hmm. I think generally people who feel like they have self-worth are more likely to take responsibility for things,
right,
than people who feel less like they have worth.
Yeah.
Right. People who feel like they can't do very much or they're incapable. When we feel like we are unable, we just feel like we're unable, right? When we don't see the ability that we have.
Exactly.
But I think that being able to see our own ability, see the strengths that we have, see our ability to respond to things, I think that can help build confidence.
Totally.
When we start increasing self-awareness of the positive things that we can contribute, right? Even just the mindset of, I'm just going to do what I can to contribute to the world around me. That makes us want to do something. My uncle, Daryl, who I was named after, during COVID, he ran a gym. He owned a gym. He did bodybuilding. He trains people. And during COVID, he couldn't do any training because all the gyms were closed, right? And so at first he wasn't sure what to do, but then they started just adapting. They're like, all right, well, we're going to open a mobile gym. We're going to have so right now he's actually getting ready to release it. Everything's like all ready to go, but they decided to put this plan together to do this completely different. He's been training people virtually online. Mm-hmm. So he's been like Skype trainings and he just modified the way he was doing it, right? He wasn't just going to let the situation stop him, but he's somebody who he has a mindset of, I can do this. He's very self-motivated, right? He doesn't need somebody else to tell him that he can do something. He'll tell himself, I can do this. Right. And that ability to not need another person to tell us, when we get to that point, when we can start seeing inside of ourselves, every single person has gold inside of them. Right. Every person has things that are worth being drawn out. Yeah. Every single person has gifts to the world. Mm-hmm. Every single person has an ability to have a positive impact. But when we don't acknowledge those things, the world around us suffers for it. The people closest to us suffer for it, and we suffer for it. Right. Because we're not acknowledging our own ability to contribute to the world around us. Right. And that might just be a matter of taking time to reflect on the things that we're good at, the things that do come naturally to us, right? Having some time to just increase and grow in self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And because as we do that, we start realizing the power that we have, right? We start realizing our ability to do something. Right. And maybe it happens over, I would say it happens over time. It grows over time. Totally. But it can start whenever, right? We can always start to acknowledge our ability to do something. Right. There's this word called, this term, agency. Yeah. And it's about essentially being an active agent, right? Someone's sense of how much of what they're doing is up to them, right? That's their sense of agency. When someone has a high sense of agency, they have the awareness, they have the sense that they are the one choosing to do things. Right. Right.
They are the one, like
They were a
catalyst
cause
for things. Like they're a cause.
They're a cause. Yes, they're a cause of other things happening.
Right.
Right. I do this and this happens. I move here and this happens. Right. I start tapping the table and it makes sounds. That's me knowing that I am an active agent in the world. I am making an impact. Right. I can clap my hands and make noise.
Which is a gift to be, by the way, because not everything is an active agent. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Like the fact that we actually get to choose to do things and that we are movers of things, right? Like that's a law of physics, right? Like there needs movers. Like force exerted, like leads to, I can't actually say the law, but basically like you need force on something in order for it to move, right? There needs to be causation, right? And so the fact that we are beings, like that God made us beings that actually can cause things to happen, that's a huge thing. Yeah,
and that's what a sense of agency is, whether or not is how much you feel like you are a cause for other things to happen.
Yeah.
Right. So
when you have, to be reckoned with.
You are a force to be reckoned with.
Right.
When you have a high sense of agency, that's what you feel. You feel like I can make things happen. I can do things. I do this and this happens. We recognize our own ability to make decisions. We recognize our own ability to do something, to say something, to respond to something. When we have a low sense of agency, it's more like we're living at the effect of other things. My life is a result of everything around me.
Right.
Right.
Certain circumstances, situations.
Exactly. That's living at effect with a low sense of agency. My life is a result of the things around me.
Right.
Rather than a high sense of agency would say, my life is a result of me, of what I can do, what I'm actually doing. The life that I'm living is my decision.
Right.
Maybe it's not going to be exactly what I want, but I can influence it. Right. I can influence what I want, what my life is like. I can impact what my life is like. If I have a low sense of agency, then I'm saying I can't do anything about this. I have no influence over this. I have no control. I can't do anything.
Right.
And I think it's a mindset. Yeah. And it starts with that awareness of like learning what is it that I actually have responsibility over? What is it that I actually have influence over?
Right. And I think a lot of things change too when you realize that you're not the only one that is a cause in your own life, though, because I do agree with that. I like agency and believing that you're a force to be reckoned with in the world, but I think that we were also made to have God be a force in our lives, right? Because it's like me being a force on my own, I just mess things up, usually, I mean, I'll kind of, jack things up, you know what I mean? But like that God even uses those and forces, he's a force in my life to move all of those things. And, the scripture says to work out all those things for good, so it's even inviting like another cause like in your life, another force in your life to be moving with you, moving those things, right?
Yeah, help you move.
And they feel even more solidified when you have, kind of that agreement between you and the Holy Spirit, being a force in the world. And I think something that's also important is in accepting responsibility is the scriptures, about owning up, and being a genuine person. You talked a lot right now about, like, wait, what were you talking about? Shoot.
About which part? About agency?
Yeah, you talked about agency, but, oh my goodness. Basically what I was going to say is this, like, we have like the ideals in scripture to own up for things that we've done.
Yeah.
And like, the risk, when you're a confident person, you talked a lot about like not feeling like you're actually confident, and how having a confident mindset, changes your perspective so that you actually do take responsibility for your life. Right.
Yeah.
And then that also allows you to take risks. You know what I mean? It is a risk to be honest.
Yeah.
It's a risk to own up to something. Right. And so scripture and that's why I wanted to add that there's another causation and something influencing your life from the outside to build you up, right? In that confidence, because I don't think if it was for scripture and my relationship with God that I would own up to anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because what I see throughout scripture is like when people own up to stuff, like there's healing, there's forgiveness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Something that I spoke about with my youth students this past week is the longer you hide and the longer you try and pretend like you're all good and not admit and own up to what you're doing, the more that you actually keep yourself from the experience of forgiveness.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I was saying to him, like, God's forgiveness is available, but the more you pretend like you don't need it, the more you keep yourself
from actually receiving
from actually receiving it. And so it was the relationship with God and Scripture, you know, and then His force in my life that made me realize, I think I got to take the risk to be honest, you know, and I got to take the risk, you know, to be open about things and to be authentic about things and to own up. And in my leadership, you know, at church, to not make it they didn't do this thing, you know what I mean? They're not doing it right, you know, to like actually put it on me and say, no, I'm responsible for my own team. You know, one of my favorite moments, one of my favorite moments with you, Daryl, was we were leading a young adults ministry, or I was leading the young adults ministry. And I bring up this story all the time. I don't think Daryl remembers it besides the fact that I brought it up, but it was not one of my highlights in my leadership career or whatever. But basically I was telling people to put chairs and tables back after the service was over. Do you remember this? You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I was getting angry at everybody because they weren't putting them back the right way, you know? And I was just like, okay, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, just put them back this way. I was getting kind of sarcastic with them, and Daryl just called me out. And he just said to me, like they're not going to know unless you like communicate that to them. You know, is basically what you said.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But it was in a very loving, because Daryl's always loving, but a very loving, but a very stern way. And it just like convicted my heart, you know what I mean? About like how it was important it was as a leader to take responsibility and how I communicate and what my expectations were for my leaders, you know, to like set this stuff back up, you know? So like having community around you, you know what I mean? To encourage you and to call you out for those things. And then having like Scripture and having the ideals of the Word, you know what I mean? And then having the Holy Spirit to be able to call you into risk and to call you into owning up to things and being honest about things. Like when you start doing that, you start realizing that honesty is awesome. You know, it really is awesome. It makes you a more authentic person. It helps you grow when you're actually honest about where you're at and owning up to things. It makes relationships so much better. Oh my gosh, I love like not blaming my girlfriend for like for all the things, or like taking on responsibility with her to say, no, this is like an us thing. Like it's not like something you have to deal with. It's like, hey, let's do this together, or just saying, hey, this was a me thing, and owning up when I need to for that kind of stuff. You know, like that builds connection like with people, that builds connection with yourself, authenticity in yourself. And no wonder that guy that Tony Robbins met, you start experiencing the joy start to come back into your life, right? Because you actually feel like you do have that agency, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, holy moly, you know, like I've taken responsibility, and now like everything is starting to come together because it's got this foundation, you know, that is just solid, you know? So I just think it's awesome.
It's awesome.
It really is awesome.
Yeah. I think that if we had more people in the world, the more that we are able to just take responsibility for ourselves, and if every single person in the universe,
in the whole entire universe, because we don't know about you aliens out there, listen to your brain on goggy.
If every person took responsibility for themselves, the way that they felt, the way that they, you know, to the extent that's responsible, you know, it makes sense, to the way that they respond to people, to their decision to say something or not say something, their decision to do something or not do something. The more that we have people doing that, I think the better the world's going to be.
Totally.
Because
100%. The
best marriages that I've seen are the people who are taking responsibility for themselves and for their marriage.
Right.
When I see people and I talk to people who are in marriages that are unhappy, people are blaming the other person.
Dude, constantly.
Right? Whenever I see people who are in happy, fulfilled, long marriages, they are responsible for the state of their marriage. They know that, right? They tell me to make the most of every day. That's taking responsibility. Right? That means no matter what happens, make the most of it.
Right.
You can't do that if you're trying to blame somebody else. Because as long as you're blaming, you're putting the power somewhere else.
Right.
And then you can't do anything about it.
Right. And then how is your marriage going to change?
How is your marriage going to change if you're always blaming somebody else for the state of your marriage? Right? What are you going to do about it?
Right.
What can you do about it? And I think the world will become a better place, because when you blame, you be lame. Nobody wants a world full of people
that are lame,
that just be lame.
You had to throw that in there before we ended, didn't you?
Those are one of the things I took away from college. One of the main things I took away from college is that when you blame, you be lame. Don't be lame.
Don't be lame.
We don't want a world full of people who be lame.
No. Ain't nobody want friends that be lame.
No. Nobody wants to be friends with somebody.
That be lame. That's true. Lame. That's true. Yeah. So, anything else, Daryl?
I think we could wrap it up.
Yeah, I think we could wrap it up. I mean, we could go longer for sure. There's more to talk about, but maybe that's another episode for Your Brain On. God. Yeah. But yeah, we're excited that you guys got to listen to this one. Yeah, we hope and pray that you think about some of the things that we talked about today, to take in that responsibility, and look at those areas of your life where you can take responsibility and see those areas where your mind, sometimes it's literally just the mind, going crazy, trying to look for a source of comfort by blaming other people. And we get so locked into it. We're like, we don't even want to blame other people, but we are, but we'll become, have a sense of self-awareness, sit with yourself, take a deep breath and say, hey, what am I not taking responsibility over? What have I been blaming on some other object, some other thing, some other person, some other situation in my life, where maybe you can't change that situation, but you can change how you respond to it now. And you could start in little moments today. We go little by little. This isn't you just snap your fingers and then everything's everything's solid and you never want to blame anybody ever again, right? We go little by little and take responsibility little by little as we learn to grow, and as we get better and better and better, like Daryl said earlier, our circle of influence begins to grow rather larger maybe even than our circle of concern, where we feel like, oh man, I'm actually in charge and I have agency in my life, and allow also the Holy Spirit to come in and to encourage you to take risks in being honest and opening up about things, and even for him to give you the courage to sit with your own things that you don't want to own up to, because that is painful and that is uncomfortable. We talked about embracing emotions. That's a huge one. Shame, shame and guilt. Those are real things that come sometimes when we own up to things. So be encouraged to sit in those things, to experience those emotions, and then own up, take responsibility for our lives, because it'll make everything better. A lot of things better, our relationships and our work life and school life and just everything. Yeah.
I think, and don't be afraid to apologize for when you have blamed.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a big part of healing in relationships, is reclaiming responsibility that you had in something that happened.
Yeah. Reclaiming the responsibility you let go.
Yeah.
That authority. Right. Absolutely, guys. Well, we think you're awesome. Thanks for listening to episode 18 of Your Brain on God. Make sure to follow us on Spotify, on iTunes Podcasts, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Your Brain on God. Hit the like, hit the subscribe button, and we will see you back here in a week for Your Brain on God. God. Love you guys.
Love you.
Peace out. Yeah.